Welcome to the Executive Insights podcast brought to you by AWS. I'm Phil LeBrun. I'm a director of enterprise strategy with Amazon Web Services. I'm delighted to be joined today by Rockett. Rockett, could you introduce yourself and what you do?
So as you say, Phil, everyone just calls me Rockett. So I'm at Adobe. I work in the legal group, but my background is one of a blended background. I'm a software developer, and then I went to law school to become a copyright attorney. So I'm essentially the legal CTO for Adobe.
What went wrong?
Oh, that's hilarious. What went wrong, actually, when I was working as an engineer, unfortunately, I'm old enough. Hopefully you can't see that wrinkles in my face or anything like that. But I'm old enough, they used to print out the organization book. It was like a yellow pages, like 400, 500 pages. And I was smack dab in the middle. And I was like, I will go nowhere over the series of years. So I just start cold calling people on page one with the following question. How do I get in the first 5 pages? I worked at GE at the time. I was smart enough not to call Jack Welch, but I called everyone else on page one. And one guy picked up the phone, happened to be Chief Intellectual Property Counsel. And he said, go to law school. And that's how I wound up in law school.
So what do you do with Adobe today, and particularly with generative AI?
On one hand, I'm part of the crew that we do all the internal AI enablement. So there are tons of groups inside of Adobe that we're just trying to make our business go more efficient, faster. And then for our products, we were out in front very early with our Firefly product, which is a generative imaging model. And then we've added AI Assistant to our Acrobat product, which is more about words and language. So we support those teams as we go from ideation to experimentation all the way to market.
That's really interesting, but CTO for legal.
Yes.
That brings shivers to my spine, but sounds like you're in a role that's very much about enablement of the technology.
Yeah, and the way I look at legal is a department in most companies, but legal touches nearly everything. Think about all your sales contracts. Think about procurement, right? So it's any technology that relates to legal. Matter of fact, Phil, I've been saying pretty prominently, I don't have the data to back this up, but I would say legal as a vertical is probably the second biggest publisher of words in the world. Second to a magazine, a newspaper, and book publishers. It's just that we can't count it because when legal publishes, it's like a private publication between 2 companies under NDA or what have you. But there are compendiums and compendiums of information between companies, but then there's cases, and then there's policies and statutes and laws. So a lot of publication in legal cutting across all different areas.
That's really interesting when you start to think about all of those legal publications and generative AI being generative and how those come together, because there's the spirit and the intent of the law. How does that work?
Well, I mean, in theory, it's a godsend because anything legal, may it be cases or even your contracts, they're typically based on something that happened already. So the idea that generative AI basically is trained on things that have pre-existed, then generates the next thing, I think it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity. And the experiments that we've run, we've been completely pleased. And our Acrobat AI Assistant product is a good example of it doing essentially that.
When you took your initial steps for generative AI in the organization, looking at things like competitive advantage, for instance, how did you plan and prepare for that?
We're all familiar with the term a use case. And nearly everything is experiment, exploration. And we looked at the word use case, and we're like, it's not one-dimensional. A use case is multi-dimensional. So we actually defined or redefined use case, and we have 6 elements we look at. And we label them A through F just so people can say A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So A is what team is trying to design or use this AI. B, what technology? C, what input data, content are they going to use? Right? D, what output is going to come out of this generated? E, who is their audience? It may not be them, it may be another group. And then F, what is their overall objective? So we look at those 6 elements. You actually can tune based upon what models you're looking at, technology, type of data from data privacy and or otherwise, and actually tune yourself into a spot where you can enable.
What can you do as opposed to, I think F was outcome. What are we trying to achieve for our business with this technology?
Correct. And sometimes people that is the only element they're looking at.
How did you drive alignment around that framework and way of thinking across your organization?
Well, we basically got everyone into the room, and who's everyone? Everyone includes, we have people in procurement who, when it's a third-party model, they procure it. We have people in our IT group who actually review third-party technology for security and otherwise. Data privacy. We have an AI ethics group. Our CISO has just another whole group that's looking at other security parameters. So we brought everyone into the room, realizing that they're going to be looking at this use case, A through F, from a different lens, from a different perspective, from a different point of view. And we collected all the questions that each constituent would have, shrunk them down, made them concise, made it a flow so that you, as somebody who wanted to use the technology, you wouldn't like be, inundated by too many questions. And we started driving it by a simple form. That form is now more dynamic and routes and does a bunch of things, but really it was just collection of the various questions that various experts would need to know in order to clear it.
I like the simplicity of it. I mean, that's, I think, part of the art, isn't it? Taking what is a complex issue with lots of questions and getting it down to the real essence of what you're trying to get people to think about.
Definitely. Also, you come to realize that some of these people who want to use AI for a use case, they don't know the use case yet. So, they come at you, again, thinking that maybe legal or privacy or security is going to be some gate. And you go, no, just fill out the form. And they get stuck halfway in the middle of the form because they haven't thought it through. But then they think it through by the time they complete the form, and then everything just goes way faster.
How do you get people who are wanting to do stuff to think about it rather than outsource that thinking to other functions? I really like the way you framed that. But how did you drive things like change management and adoption of generative AI in the organization? Because that's one, we often see great proof of concepts developed, and then another great proof of concept developed, and they don't go anywhere. So how did you actually get traction?
I think that relates to the power of this technology. So when I used to code, I used to do actually UI, UX prototypes and other type of coding. And I remember at times we would do pseudocode. Prompting, if you will, is kind of a pseudocode, but because it's in natural language, and anybody can do it. But that means that you don't have to PowerPoint it, then pass it off to an engineering team to pass it off to the next one that maybe, and this thing goes around and around and around, then what you get is not what you wanted. You can do it yourself. It's quite democratizing. So the change really is what you were thinking, you can actually imagine it. You can tweak it. You can continue working at it until you get the result that you are looking for. And so by empowering every individual, that is making the difference. And what I'm seeing right now is those who start prompting, and now we're going to something called the control era we can talk about later. But those who start prompting and get those results, you can't take it away from them. And those who don't want to prompt have never prompted. And as soon as you get them hooked on the prompting and they're getting that immediate gratification, you got them.
Do you see a sort of halo effect where people see individuals who get hooked on the prompts, as you put it, and getting some incredible results? And I want to be part of that. Has that happened in Adobe?
Slowly, that kind of like fear of missing out is starting to pick up. But I'll tell you what's got in the way, although we're addressing it. And I think every company has seen this. AI scared two types of individuals. It scared the non-technologists because they were like, the non-technologists, oh my God, what is this? This seems very powerful. What's it going to do to me? What's going to do to my job? But it also scared the technologists. Every other piece of compute that we've had has been a deterministic type of technology. I code it, I run it through the compiler. Either it compiles or it doesn't. If it doesn't compile, there are bugs, I got to go fix it. But as soon as it compiles, it will run like that every single time. What messed up technologists, this is a probabilistic technology. I do the same prompt, I get a different answer. So the technologists were struggling because we didn't have that dependency and stability. The non-technologists were scared. So we're just trying to bring that noise level down and really get everybody participating as part of the party.
And what did you do in terms of support and training to help people understand what this could be?
So what we did, our HR team got very involved, and they treated it like, you have HR programs all the time. It'd be about how to manage people or how to give rewards once a year. They created an entire education campaign and podcasts internally, which actually got some of the biggest viewership that we got out of anything that we do inside. And so they really use kind of an internal social media strategy, if you will.
Interesting. One of the stats I saw recently said about 33% of employees in organizations are using generative AI, whether it's sanctioned or not. How in Adobe did you get people to pull you in at the right point?
We've done two things. So we have a process that by which we clear things. We made that process completely transparent. So you know like how long it's taking, and it's almost like if you're getting a tax refund or something, you can see where it's in the system. So we've been very transparent about where the requests are. We've been very transparent that if your request, if your A through F looks like something we've seen before, it is fast tracked. So that was a big one. And then the other thing was we actually showcase the results of prior experiments to everyone. So you can see, oh my goodness, I'm curious in this. How did that work out for them? So you're actually learning on a foundation of experiments that happened before you, even the ones that concluded the week prior.
I find that really interesting because often if something's successful, we say, successful, let's move on. We don't need to share it with anyone. If it's a failure, let's not talk about it. So how do you create that visibility in the organization?
Well, we're a very intellectually curious entity. So I think exactly to your point, when something doesn't work, it's just software at the end of the day. So we can zero in, look at it, figure out why it didn't work, just have a different look at a different perspective. I think people are enticed. They're drawn to, if the use case seems like one that would be of high impact, high value, and someone else got it maybe 60, 70% of the way. They want to pitch in and try to get to 100%. So it kind of creates this one incubator picks up where the last incubator left off.
How did you approach that challenge of making sure you were changing business processes adequately and managing costs as you scaled initiatives in Adobe?
We've had what we call it a DDOM, a data-driven operating model. So we've had metrics and continue to have metrics throughout anything that we do. So we're pretty clear on like what the level of effort is, what the costs are, what the ROI is. And because of that, those areas were fertile territory because we already had a line in the sand for where we were right now. And the organization, I think most organizations are like this, has some appetite for investment. Luckily, this technology is not super expensive as compared to technologies we had in the past. So the investment is not super high to experiment. And the results that we've seen, just mostly in the number of days it takes to get something done. Reducing the errors in handoff, more humans involved, the more likelihood errors could occur. For our sales fleet, customers either before a sale or after a sale may need, before a sale, questions about a product. After a sale, may need support. Best thing for a customer is that question that they have. The person sitting there at the end of the phone line or the chat line can answer it immediately. They don't have to bounce between 6 or 7 reps to kind of have a meeting and figure out how do I answer this thing, because this technology has enabled us to put all of our reference materials in. AI is sitting on top, and it's just flying in the answers for them.
So almost it's created additional organizational agility.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the people feel good. Inside organizations, we talk about employee experience, right? Well, the employee is sitting there, they're doing their job. They're having self-gratification because I did it quickly. The other person is like satisfied. They're like, I'm gonna go have another coffee or something. I don't know, but they feel good about themselves.
Well, and especially if you've got an organization that's curious, it must start to open up some really interesting avenues in terms of creativity and I wonder what else I can do with this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Talking about creativity, legal. So when you thought about your frameworks, your policies and the such like, how did you go about developing those with your end users, the people who are going to use the technology?
Well, actually, our roots go back before AI. We started something called the Content Authenticity Initiative. We really had our heads already thinking deeply about copyright, about information, about how people consume information, about how people can be misled. And in a weird way, or maybe not so great way. That foundation was key and an accelerant for us into Gen AI land, because it begins with learning on assets that have existed already. And then we even submitted our own legislation in the US side, of Federal Anti-Impersonation Rights Act, just to kind of take care of these vagaries and ambiguities in a right, balanced way, where companies and creatives and everybody can coexist in these vague areas that were never covered by copyright law, because copyright law did not imagine generative AI.
What advice would you give to listeners around how do you find the right balance in a different organization that you found in terms of agility and protecting the organization? Because these things seem to go around and around in circles and committee meetings and such like. How do you bust through that?
So from my perspective, this journey began 20 years ago. And I remember when I was an engineer before I went to law school, with that phraseology that still makes me shake: do more with less.
No.
And a lot of us were stuck in that paradigm for at least 2 decades, or at least a decade, as you bounce between companies. Even in the beginning, that concept made sense because there were programs like Six Sigma where you can get like a black belt and things like this, and you could look at your company, the back office, the front office, manufacturing, and squeeze out inefficiencies that didn't make any sense. But within 3 to 5 years, most companies can knock out inefficiencies, but they keep, that mantra just keeps coming at people, attached to things that are not even related. Like, we're in a macroeconomic environment. Okay, so you have to continue to do more with less. Those two things aren't. So there are companies that are stuck there, and there are other companies that have moved on to, well, can I not do more with less? Can I do more with more? Where AI is that more. And wait a second, maybe I can move from do more with less, do more with more, but what do I really want to do? Well, I don't want to do either of those. I want to do less to get more impact. I want to focus on less things. I want the minutia taken off my plate, because if I have less things to focus on, the things that require human creativity, nuance, experts, with more, this AI, then I can achieve more, and now I have more impact. So my message to organizations who are trying to just trying to get it going is go back to that old paradigm and figure out, are you stuck in do more with less? And if you are stuck in do more with less, address it way up there, because that doesn't work anymore. That is old. And everyone else has moved on to do more with more, and hopefully the landing zone is to less to achieve more impact.
Yeah, it's a story we hear a lot. We're very, very good at additive priorities. Some of this is about, what are you going to stop doing? One of those sticking points in many companies' minds is responsible AI, and whatever that means to them. What advice would you give in terms of how do you put the culture, the frameworks, the governance, the thinking around responsible AI in place in a way that enables you to safely accelerate the use of generative AI?
Where I would begin with the responsible AI thing is maybe not the most natural place, but I would begin with AI ethics. Because if you can get the ethics right, the rest of it kind of falls into place. If you deal with the ethical considerations first, everything else will start to fall into place, and your organization will start thinking in that way.
Don't start with policy and procedure, start with
Please
mindset.
Don't. Please don't.
It's interesting. It's an interesting way of framing it. But that in itself is quite a hard change.
Yeah.
But I like that gut check. Does it make you feel slightly queasy?
Correct. And think about our customers, no matter what line of business you're in, right? We are all trying to preserve and increase the goodwill between our enterprise and our customers. So this aligns with that as well.
Rockett, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you, Phil. I really enjoyed this, and it's just been a pleasure talking with you about this. As you can tell, this is a topic I love.